The smell of cheap cigarettes and forgotten coffee hit Elena Chen like a fist. She blinked, disoriented, and found herself standing in her parents' living room. The beige carpet was the same. The faded floral curtains were the same. The cracked leather of the armchair where her father sat, a cigarette burning down to the filter between his nicotine-stained fingers, was exactly, painfully the same. And there, on his knees before her, was her brother Kevin. His fingers were digging into her shoulders with a desperate, clawing grip. His face was a mess of tears and snot, eyes red-rimmed and wild with a fervor she remembered too well. A wave of vertigo crashed over her, so powerful she nearly staggered. This wasn't déjà vu. This was memory. A memory of a life already lived, a life that had ended in a white-tiled hospital corridor with the smell of antiseptic and the sound of her own scream echoing off the sterile walls. "Elena, please." Kevin's voice cracked as he begged, the words tumbling out in a rehearsed, frantic rush. "You're my sister. My only sister. I love her. I'll die without her. It's $50,000 for the bride price. Chloe's family won't let her marry me without it. Your condo is worth over $200,000. You can sell it. You have to help me. Please, I'm begging you. $50,000. Her condo." The words were a key, unlocking a floodgate of horrors she had somehow, impossibly, survived once before. In the life she had already lived, she had said yes. She had been the good daughter, the dutiful older sister. She had sold her beautiful two-bedroom condo, the one with the downtown view and the kitchen island she had saved for years to afford, and handed every last dollar to her brother. And what had her sacrifice bought? A memory, sharp and cold as a shard of glass, sliced through her mind. Chloe, her new sister-in-law, waltzing into their family home with one hand resting on her barely there pregnant belly. "The baby needs sunlight," she had announced, her voice dripping with a sweet, cloying venom. "We'll be taking Elena's room." And Kevin, her flesh and blood, had not just agreed. He had helped pack Elena's books and clothes into garbage bags and toss them onto the front lawn while their parents were out. Their mother, Lily, had rushed out into a January blizzard to find her, tears freezing on her cheeks. A semi-truck had jackknifed it on the ice on I-90. Lily had died alone, a Jane Doe on a cold gurney, while Kevin was in the maternity ward, cooing over his newborn son, and their father, Henry, was on a construction site with his phone switched off. The memory of signing the death certificate by herself was so real, so physical, that Elena felt the pen in her hand, felt the cheap hospital paper under her fingers. She had been alone, surrounded by the steady, indifferent beep of machines that were no longer connected to her mother. A doctor, his face a blur of professional sympathy, had pulled a white sheet over Lily's face, and the world had simply ended. And now Kevin was here, on his knees, asking her to do it all over again. Something fundamental inside Elena Chen shifted. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, crystalline clarity, a purpose forged in the fires of a lifetime of regret. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice, when it came, was as flat and sharp as a scalpel. "Help you." She didn't push him away. She kicked him. Her foot, still in its sensible work flat, connected squarely with the center of his chest. She poured every ounce of grief, every sleepless night, every tear she had shed over her mother's cold hand, into the motion. Kevin flew backward, his head cracking against the leg of the coffee table with a sickening, wet thud. A half-empty mug of cold coffee toppled and shattered on the floor. He sprawled on the carpet, gasping like a landed fish, his eyes wide with primal shock. "Elena!" Henry Chen shot to his feet, his gaunt face purpling with a familiar, impotent rage. "Have you lost your mind?" That's your brother. Brother. Elena rose slowly, deliberately. She stood over Kevin, her shadow falling across his terrified face. Her hands, she noticed with a strange, detached fascination, were not shaking. This worthless piece of trash has done nothing with his life for 24 years. He can't hold a job, he bleeds you and Mom dry for money, and now he wants me to sell my home so he can buy a wife. Is that what you're so proud of, Dad? Is that the son who's going to carry on the great Chen family name? Her father's jaw worked furiously, his words a sputtered, incoherent mess of rage. He's your blood. It's your duty, you're the older sister, you have to. Duty. Elena laughed, a short, brutal, humorless sound. She bent down, grabbed a fistful of Kevin's graphic t-shirt, and hauled him up until his face, white with shock, was inches from hers. His breath, sour with panic, washed over her. Let me tell you about duty. My duty is to the woman who gave birth to me, not to a spineless little boy who's about to get conned by the neighborhood sociopath. If you want to marry Chloe, Kevin, you figure it out. You earn the money. You will not touch a single penny of my savings, and you will not lay a finger on my condo. And another thing. She pulled him closer, her voice dropping to a venomous, intimate whisper meant only for him. Your precious Chloe isn't the saint you think she is. Open your damn eyes. If she really loved you, she wouldn't be selling herself to the highest bidder. And if she's pregnant, well. A cold, cruel smile touched her lips. Maybe ask for a DNA test before you start painting the nursery. Kevin's face went slack with confusion before twisting into a mask of fury. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Elena didn't answer. She dragged him to the front door, the worn carpet bunching under his scrabbling feet. She wrenched the door open, the cheap metal of the knob cold in her hand, and shoved him out with a final, heaving push. He stumbled, fell, and skinned his palms on the concrete walkway. She slammed the door in his face, the hollow bang echoing through the suddenly silent house like a gunshot. She stood there, her forehead pressed against the cool wood of the door, breathing hard. Her entire body was a taut wire of adrenaline. The roar of blood in her ears slowly subsided, and she became aware of the deafening silence behind her. She turned. Her mother, Lily, was standing frozen in the kitchen doorway. Her apron was dusted with flour, and she clutched a ceramic mixing bowl to her chest like a shield. Her face was a battlefield of emotions, shock, confusion, and there, underneath it all, a tiny flicker of something that looked like horrified awe. Her father had retreated back to his armchair, a collapsed, hollowed-out figure, his face the color of old ash. The sight of her mother, alive, standing, breathing, hit Elena with the force of a physical blow. The cold, surgical rage that had armored her dissolved in an instant, replaced by a tidal wave of love so fierce and desperate it made her knees buckle. She didn't walk to her mother, she lunged. She crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped her arms around Lily with a strength born of a decade of grief. Her mother was warm. She was solid. She smelled of yeast and lavender laundry detergent, the exact, perfect scent of Elena's entire childhood. Her heart was beating. She was alive. Elena buried her face in the warm crook of her mother's neck, and a sob she hadn't known was building tore itself from her chest. Mom, she choked out, the word muffled against Lily's skin. I missed you. I missed you so much. Lily's arms came around her, confused but instinctively steady, the mixing bowl pressing awkwardly into Elena's back. Oh, my sweet girl, she murmured into Elena's hair. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. What's gotten into you? Yes, Elena thought, clinging tighter, her fingers twisting into the soft cotton of her mother's dress. "You are. And this time, I will burn the entire world down before I let anyone take you from me again." The next day, the fluorescent lights of the office break room hummed their usual, mind-numbing tune, but Elena's mind was miles away. She was still mentally replaying the feel of her mother's heartbeat against her cheek, still drawing strength from it. Her colleague and best friend, Lucy Zhang, slid into the chair opposite her, a cup of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other, her face alight with the thrill of a particularly juicy piece of gossip. "Okay, you will not believe what my cousin from back home just told me," Lucy began, leaning in conspiratorially. She was an incorrigible gossip, but a sharp one, with an encyclopedic knowledge of everyone's business. "There's this girl, a few years younger than us. Apparently, she was juggling, like, half a dozen boyfriends for over 2 years. All long distance, all totally clueless. She had them all sending her money every month, for books, for helping her mom with the rent, you name it." Elena took a slow sip of her own coffee, a vague unease prickling at the back of her neck. And she finally snagged a proposal from the one with the most cash. "He's not rich, but his family has some assets, you know. They settled on a $50,000 bride price, a whole big thing. So she starts the messy process of dumping the others. But one of them, a guy from a few states over, just refused to accept it. He got in his car and drove through the night to surprise her and win her back. He finds her coming out of a bridal boutique, arm in arm with her new fiancé, looking at wedding dresses." Lucy slapped the table, her eyes wide with delight. "He absolutely loses it. Starts screaming, 'You told me you were going to marry me,' right there on the sidewalk. The fiancé figures it out, turns green, and cancels the wedding on the spot. The whole thing was apparently a huge, public mess." The vague unease in Elena's gut sharpened into a cold, hard point of ice. The number. The age. The audacity of the scam. It was too specific, too perfect a fit for a puzzle she was already assembling in her mind. "This girl," she said, her voice carefully casual. "Do you happen to know her name? First name, at least?" Lucy squinted, thinking. "I think it was Chloe. My cousin said she was always posting these innocent, sugary sweet quotes on her profile." "Why, you think you know her?" "Chloe." The name landed with a near-audible click. The same name as her brother's demanding, doe-eyed girlfriend. A girl who was currently trying to extort her family for the exact same amount of money. The coincidence was too vast to be a coincidence at all. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Elena's face, a predator's smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We might have met in passing," she said. Her mind was already racing ahead, piecing together a strategy. This wasn't just family drama anymore. This was a con. A cold, calculated, serial con. And she had just been handed the first, crucial piece of evidence. Her phone, sitting on the table, vibrated, rattling against the ceramic mug. The screen lit up with a text from her mother. The message was short, typed in a frantic, hushed rush, as if Lily was hiding in a closet to send it. "Your brother's back. He brought the girl. She says she's pregnant. Please come home." The drive back to her parents' house in the suburbs was a blur of pure, focused fury. Elena ran 2 red lights without noticing. When she burst through the front door, the scene before her was a perfect, sickening replica of the nightmare she had already lived. Chloe Lynn was curled delicately on the worn leather sofa, weeping soft, photogenic tears into Kevin's shoulder. She was wearing a modest floral sundress, her dark hair cascading in soft, touchable waves. Every detail of her appearance, the minimal makeup, the trembling lower lip, the way she clutched Kevin's arm like he was her only protector in a hostile world, was a masterclass in victimhood. Kevin's arm was wrapped around her, his face a rigid mask of protective fury directed squarely at the door, at Elena. "Elena," Chloe sniffled, making a weak, trembling attempt to rise. Her voice was a perfect, practiced instrument of fragility. "I'm so sorry for any trouble I've caused between you and Kevin. I know you have your reservations about me, and I probably deserve them. But the baby, this tiny, innocent life, it's not the baby's fault. Please, can't we find a way to be a family?" Elena didn't break stride. She let her heavy work bag drop from her shoulder onto a chair with a loud thud. She sat down in the armchair opposite them, taking her time, smoothing her skirt over her knees. She crossed her legs with a deliberate, unhurried slowness. Her gaze was a surgical instrument, and she let it rest on Chloe without blinking. "How many weeks?" Elena asked. Her voice was calm. Dangerously calm. Chloe's lower lip trembled, a perfect performance. 8 weeks, I think. Give or take. I think. So you haven't seen a doctor? No ultrasound? Was it just a home pregnancy test?" A home test," Chloe admitted, her voice shrinking to a whisper. 3 of them, actually. All positive. I've been too scared to go to a doctor alone. The anxiety of it all. So, to be clear," Elena leaned forward, her tone deceptively gentle, "there is currently no medical proof of this pregnancy. Just your word. And on the strength of your word, we are expected to liquidate my assets for a $50,000 cash payment to your family and, I assume, give you the biggest room in this house to prepare for the blessed event. The one with the nice southern exposure, perhaps. It's so good for a growing baby." The barb landed with surgical precision. A microflash of pure shock, cold and quickly masked, flickered in Chloe's dark eyes before the veil of soft sorrow dropped back into place. That was exactly her plan. Steal the condo money. Steal the room. Push the inconvenient sister out onto the street. Elena saw it all, the ghost of the monstrous, entitled future that was barreling down on her family. She had seen this movie before. She knew every line by heart. Kevin shot to his feet, his face contorted with a blind, defensive rage that was all the more pathetic for its predictability. "Why do you have to be such a heartless bitch, Elena? Can't you, for 1 second, just be happy for me? This is supposed to be the best thing that ever happened to me, and you're ruining it." "Happy?" Elena fixed her eyes on her brother, and she let the mask fall. For a long, silent moment, she let him see the full, unfiltered, terrifying weight of her contempt. It wasn't anger. Anger would have been too hot, too human. This was a glacier, ancient and immovable. "Oh, I'm thrilled for you, Kevin. I'm just not entirely convinced you're the father. The grass on your lawn is so impossibly, vividly green, I have a strong suspicion it's been spray-painted by a third party." The insult took a second to translate. The vulgarity of it, the sheer, casual cruelty, short-circuited Kevin's brain. His face went from red to purple. His fists clenched at his sides. "You take that back, you." "Enough." Henry Chen's roar silenced the room. He stood in the hallway, his gaunt frame trembling with a patriarch's fury. He had been listening. His tired, bloodshot eyes blazed as he looked from his son to his daughter. "This is not your house to make a scene in, Elena. A baby is a gift from heaven, and we will receive it with grace." He turned to Chloe, his expression softening into a nauseating parody of paternal kindness. "Chloe, sweetheart, you and Kevin go home now and get some rest. Don't you worry about a thing. I'll arrange a family dinner. We'll meet your parents and get this bride price sorted out, man to man. Chloe dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue, the picture of wounded, forgiven grace. Thank you, Uncle Henry. I knew you'd understand. I'll be counting the minutes. As she walked toward the front door, she had to pass within inches of Elena. Her tear-streaked face was angled away from the rest of the family, and for one electrifying, private second, the mask didn't just slip, it vanished completely. Her eyes were bone-dry, hard as obsidian, and glittering with a pure, undiluted malice that would have made a lesser woman flinch. Her lips, still pouted from crying, formed two silent, unmistakable, venomous words, "Watch me." Then she was gone, the front door clicking shut with a soft, final, damning sound. In the week that followed, Elena and her father existed in a state of Arctic Cold War. She overheard him on the phone in his study, his voice a low, conspiratorial murmur, asking a real estate agent about the market value of a two-bedroom condo in the downtown district. He was doing preliminary research. He was already mentally spending her money. Without a word of complaint or confrontation, Elena took her property deed and title documents to her lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia, and had the entire property sealed with an ironclad, bulletproof legal clause. The condo could not be sold, mortgaged, or have its title transferred without Elena's personal, in-person, notarized signature. Not a power of attorney, not a family emergency. Her signature, or nothing. Her mother found the lawyer's invoice in the mail and confronted her in the kitchen that night, her hands wringing the life out of a dish towel. He's going to be furious when he finds out, Elena. Absolutely furious. You know how his blood pressure gets. He'll be furious for a month, Elena replied, her voice flat and emotionless as she chopped vegetables for dinner. If Chloe Lynn gets her hooks into this family, we'll be ruined for a lifetime. She set the knife down and turned to face her mother, taking Lily's worn, work-roughened hands in her own. She could feel the decades of manual labor in those hands, the calluses, the tiny scars from kitchen burns, the quiet, humble dignity of a life spent serving others. Mom, do you trust me? Really, truly trust me? Lily looked into her daughter's eyes, and for a moment, she didn't see her headstrong, successful daughter. She saw the little girl who used to have nightmares about monsters under the bed. And she saw something else, too, a flicker of terrible knowledge, a grief that seemed too vast and too old for Elena's 30 years. With my whole heart, my darling, Lily whispered, her own eyes filling with tears for a reason she couldn't name. With my whole heart. Then just give me a little time, Elena said, squeezing her hands. I'm going to show everyone the truth. I promise. The linchpin of Elena's plan had a name, Nathan Reed. He was the new marketing intern at her firm, 24 years old, with a clean-cut, all-American handsomeness, strong jaw, sandy brown hair, and the kind of disarming, boyish smile that made middle-aged secretaries want to pinch his cheeks. He'd sought Elena out on his very first day, all eager to please humility and a seemingly genuine interest in learning from a senior expert. He started leaving a single, fresh-cut sunflower on her desk every morning. Elena had been mildly flattered, then suspicious, then hypervigilant. What had truly set her internal alarm screaming wasn't the flattery. It was his phone. The lock screen wallpaper was a tiny, whimsical cartoon, a pink rabbit with a fluffy cotton tail, set against a lavender background. It was cute. It was also unique. And Elena had seen it once before, on a screenshot her brother had sent her months ago, boasting about his adorable new girlfriend. It was Chloe's profile picture. The thought that crystallized in Elena's mind was chilling in its clarity. Nathan wasn't a smitten intern with a crush. He was a plant. A charming, handsome, affectionate decoy. Chloe had sent him to distract her, to tie up her time and emotional energy with a fake relationship while Chloe worked on the other side of the family, tightening the financial noose. It was a sophisticated, two-pronged attack. And they had made one fatal mistake: they had used the same damn cartoon rabbit. That Friday evening, Elena asked Nathan to dinner. She suggested a quiet, dimly lit Italian bistro downtown, a place with white tablecloths and candles in Chianti bottles, the kind of place that felt inherently romantic. He arrived in a crisp navy blue blazer over a white shirt, his hair still damp from a recent shower, smelling of clean, woodsy soap and nervous energy. They sat in a secluded booth, and he looked at her across the table with such hopeful, wide-eyed, puppy-like devotion that for a fleeting, treacherous second, Elena felt a pang of something like guilt. He was a very good actor. Or maybe, a small, cynical voice whispered in her head, maybe he's not acting all of it. Maybe some part of him really does wish this was real. She ordered a bottle of expensive Barolo. She let him talk about his difficult childhood and his dreams of making it in the city. She laughed at his jokes. And then, over the main course, she went in for the kill. "Nathan," she said, taking a slow, deliberate sip of the dark red wine, "do you have a girlfriend? I feel I should ask before I let myself get too invested in whatever this is." The effect was instantaneous and microscopic. His hand, reaching for the breadbasket, hesitated for just a fraction of a second. A near-invisible tremor ran through his fingers before he recovered and grabbed a breadstick. "A girlfriend? No. God, no. I've been completely single for a long time." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," she said, smiling sweetly. "A good-looking, charming guy like you, it seems statistically improbable that you'd be on the market. There must be a string of broken hearts somewhere." The lie tasted like ash in her mouth, but her performance was flawless. She saw him visibly relax, saw a genuine blush creep up his neck. He was good. But she was better. Later that night, Elena sat in her darkened condo and called her oldest, most reliable friend, Matt Zhou. Matt was a software engineer who now ran his own boutique cybersecurity firm, a man whose unassuming, hoodie-and jeans appearance concealed a truly frightening level of digital expertise. They had been friends since they were scrawny, bullied freshmen in high school. He was the only person in the world she trusted without reservation. "You owe me for this, Elena. A lot. Like 3 expensive dinners and a lifetime supply of good coffee," Matt grumbled, but his fingers were already flying over his custom mechanical keyboard, his eyes glued to the 3 monitors that formed his command center. Within 45 minutes, he had built a comprehensive report. Nathan's public social media profiles were a sanitized wasteland. His private chat logs with a contact saved only as were wiped clean. But the universe, Matt explained with a grim satisfaction, was ruled by immutable laws. People are idiots. They always forget the metadata, and they never, ever delete their payment history. A long string of peer-to-peer transfers, $131.40, $520, gifts and transfers totaling thousands of dollars over the past 6 months, all flowed from Nathan's bank account to a single recipient whose user icon, captured in the transaction log, was a tiny pink cartoon rabbit with a fluffy tail. "Bingo," Matt said, leaning back in his chair. "Your intern is a paid asset." "Who's the rabbit?" "The rabbit is my brother's fiancé," Elena said, her voice as cold as the void between stars. "And now, I'm going to destroy her." The trap was set. All it needed was for the prey to walk into it. The following Saturday morning, Elena sat in her car, a nondescript silver sedan she had borrowed from Matt for the occasion, parked across the street from Nathan's modest apartment building. She had a large black coffee, a breakfast burrito, and the infinite patience of a woman on a holy mission. At 10:15 a.m., Nathan emerged, looking fresh and nervous, and hailed a cab. She followed. The cab took a meandering route across town, finally ending up in a slightly run-down, semi-industrial district near the river. It pulled up in front of a building with a garish neon sign that read, "The Riviera, a lover's retreat," and advertised hourly rates and in-room jacuzzis. A love hotel. Classy. Elena watched from a grimy diner across the street as Nathan paid the driver and walked in, his posture tense. 10 minutes later, a separate cab pulled up, and a woman in a pale yellow summer dress stepped out, checking her reflection in her phone camera. It was Chloe Lynn. She disappeared into the lobby, and through the smudged glass, Elena saw Nathan's hand slide possessively, intimately, around her waist before the elevator doors swallowed them both. A cold, savage, almost euphoric calm settled over Elena. This was the moment. The point of no return. She pulled out her phone, her fingers steady, and dialed 911. She pitched her voice up, making it sound young, frightened, and deeply concerned. "Hi, yes, I need to report something. I think there's something illegal going on at the Riviera Hotel on 92nd Street. I saw some really suspicious-looking men going in and out of room 703 with young women, and I think they might be involved in prostitution. I'm sorry, I don't want to get involved, but I just felt I should say something." The dispatcher, calm and professional, assured her an officer would be sent to investigate. The second call was to Matt. "Get down to the Riviera Motel. Now. Bring your best camera and the video equipment. The fish are in the barrel." 20 minutes later, Elena and Matt were standing on the shabby, floral-carpeted hallway of the 7th floor. The air smelled of stale perfume and cheap disinfectant. They could hear the commotion inside room 703 before the door even opened, a sharp, authoritative knock, raised panicked voices, the rustle of frantic clothing. Matt already had his professional-grade DSLR up, the red recording light glowing, a discreet wireless mic pack clipped to his belt. He gave Elena a grim nod. The door swung open. Nathan Reed stood there, shirtless, his hair a wild mess, his chest heaving. A fresh, angry red scratch mark ran down the side of his neck to his collarbone. Behind him, wrapped in a thin, cheap white hotel bathrobe, her meticulously applied makeup now smeared into a raccoon mask of panic, was Chloe Lynn. Her face was a masterpiece of pure, undiluted terror. The two patrol officers, a man and a woman, stood in the doorway. The male officer, a heavy-set man with a weary expression, held up a hand. "All right, folks, we got a call about some suspicious activity here. What's going on?" "Officers, I swear, this is a complete misunderstanding," Nathan stammered, his voice cracking as he tried to block the doorway with his body. He was a terrible liar under pressure. "We're a couple. We were just spending some private time together. This is my girlfriend." "Is that so?" A new voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. It was feminine, cold, and utterly self-assured. Elena stepped out from the alcove where she had been waiting, into the direct view of the open door. Matt's camera light glowed steadily behind her. "That's fascinating." The sound of Elena's voice hit Chloe like a physical blow. All the blood drained from her face so rapidly that for a second, she looked like a corpse. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Elena didn't look at her. She fixed her cold, furious gaze on Nathan. "Because my brother, Kevin Chen, is at home right now," cooking a pot of chicken soup for his pregnant fiancée. "And you?" she said, her voice dropping to a register of pure, righteous fury. "You are the man who's been sleeping with her behind his back. You're the man who pretended to like me, who left flowers on my desk, just to keep me distracted. You are a liar and a fraud, Nathan, and your face," she finished, "is the face of a man who just got caught." One of the officers, the woman, let out a low, almost inaudible whistle. "Well," she said, flipping her notebook closed. "This is a new one." Nathan's guilty, anguished silence was the only confession the room needed. He just stared at Elena, his face a crumpled mask of shame, and said nothing. In the bathroom behind him, Chloe finally found her voice. It was a shriek, raw and primal. You set us up. You and him, you're in on this together. This is entrapment." Elena just smiled at her. It was the most terrifying smile Chloe had ever seen. "Have a nice afternoon, you too," she said. "We have everything we need." Elena didn't release the video immediately. She wanted more. She wanted to build a case so overwhelming, so utterly devastating, that there would be no road back, no whispered excuses, no chance for Chloe to wriggle out of the wreckage and find another victim. The hotel footage was the smoking gun for her family. Now, she needed the public record. She and Matt went to Chloe's graduate school, a mid-tier state university on the other side of the city. They found Peter first, a shy, sweet-faced PhD student in the engineering library who had "Chloe Lynn is my inspiration" written on a post-it note stuck to his monitor. When Elena gently showed him a single photo, Chloe and Kevin, arms around each other at a family barbecue, his face crumpled like a paper bag. "She told me she was single," he whispered, his voice cracking with a grief that was painful to witness. "She told me she was too focused on her studies to date anyone, except me. She said she'd marry me when I got my doctorate." He buried his face in his hands. "I sent her $600 a month to help with her rent." They found Sophia, a fierce, articulate young woman who was the president of the campus Women in Business Club. The moment she heard Chloe's name, her eyes turned to flint. "Chloe Lynn is a predator," she stated, her voice ringing with cold certainty. "She destroyed my roommate. She seduced my roommate's boyfriend of 3 years, flaunted it in her face, and when my roommate got upset, Chloe had a dozen guys on social media calling her crazy and jealous. My roommate almost dropped out. Give me an hour." An hour later, Elena and Matt were sitting in a private room in the student union, and a seemingly endless stream of young women began to arrive. They came with screenshots of manipulative texts. They came with Venmo receipts. They came with stories of gaslighting, of stolen boyfriends, of destroyed friendships, all featuring the same doe-eyed, innocent-looking woman. Elena recorded every single one, the faces and voices piling up into an avalanche of damning evidence. The final piece was the medical report. It was almost too easy. Using a few well-placed inquiries and the name of a concerned family member, Matt pulled a digital copy of the results from Chloe's mandatory pre-enrollment physical, conducted just 3 months prior. A red circle was clinically drawn around a single line on the bloodwork panel, HCG, qualitative, result, negative. She was not, and had never been, pregnant. The final, theatrical act was set for Sunday evening. Elena Chen had spent the entire day cooking, a nervous, frantic energy filling the house. The dining table was laden with a true feast, a whole roasted chicken, a massive platter of braised short ribs, garlic green beans, hand-pulled noodles, and a half-dozen other family favorites. It was an offering, a sacrifice to the gods of a happy, prosperous union. Chloe sat at the center of it all, like a queen on a throne, next to Kevin. One hand rested protectively on her stomach, a constant, unspoken reminder of her power. Her parents, Frank and Helen Lynn, sat in the seats of honor. Frank was a squat, pugnacious man who spoke in loud, declarative sentences. Helen was a thin, sharp-featured woman with a perpetual expression of sour disapproval, her eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing its value. Elena arrived last. She wasn't alone. Matt Cho walked in just behind her, a heavy camera bag slung over his shoulder. And next to him, his face a pale, sweating mask of dread, was Nathan Reed. The cheerful clatter of conversation died instantly, as if someone had pressed a mute button. Chloe's serene smile froze on her face, transforming it into a grotesque, porcelain mask. A vein in her temple began to pulse visibly. Kevin looked from Nathan to Elena, his brow furrowed in stupid, unsuspecting confusion. Elena, who are all these people? This is supposed to be a family dinner. This is my family, Elena said lightly, gesturing to Matt. My best friend. And this, she said, putting a hand on Nathan's rigid shoulder and pushing him gently forward, is my boyfriend, Nathan. I thought tonight would be the perfect night for him to meet everyone. Nathan, sweetheart, why don't you say hello to Kevin and his fiancée, Chloe? The silence that followed was a physical weight. Nathan looked at Chloe. Chloe looked at Nathan. It was a stare that lasted a fraction of a second too long, charged with a desperate, silent communication. Nathan's mouth opened, but all that came out was a dry, rasping croak. Frank Lynn, oblivious to the silent implosion happening 3 feet away from him, cleared his throat with a loud, phlegmy rumble. He was a man who only understood transactions. All right, enough chit-chat. Let's get down to business. We're all busy people. The bride price is $50,000. It's non-negotiable. Our daughter is a treasure. She's educated, she's beautiful, and now she's carrying your family's grandchild. We also expect a brand new car, something safe for the baby, and her name on the deed of the family home. It's only right. Dad, please, Chloe murmured, her voice a faint, strangled whisper. She wasn't playing the modest bride anymore, she looked like she was about to be sick. Don't make it sound so transactional. You're too soft, that's how people take advantage of you, Helen Lynn sniffed, her sharp eyes fixed on Elena's parents. If the Chen family can't provide a decent life, then there's no deal. Our daughter and our grandchild will come home with us, where they'll be properly cared for. No, please, no. Kevin's composure shattered. He turned to Elena, his eyes wild with panic. Elena, just tell them. Tell them you'll sell the condo. I know we've had our problems, but this is it, this is the final hurdle. Please, I'll do anything. I'll pay you back, I swear. Elena set down her teacup. The delicate clink of porcelain on porcelain was, in the sudden, breathless silence of the room, the loudest sound in the world. She dabbed at her lips with a napkin, folded it neatly on the table, and looked up. Her expression was one of perfect, serene calm, which made her next words infinitely more devastating. Actually, she said, her voice conversational, almost pleasant, I won't be paying a single cent. And neither will my parents. You see, I have a strict personal policy against investing in children whose parentage is, shall we say, an open question. Helen Lynn gasped, her hand flying to her string of pearls. How dare you slander my daughter at her own engagement dinner? Henry, control your child. I dare, Elena said, rising smoothly to her feet, because I have proof. She picked up the TV remote from the sideboard. You wanted a bride price. Let me show you the price of a lie. The large flat-screen TV on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't just a slideshow, it was a full, professionally edited presentation, scored with nothing but stark, deafening silence. The first image that filled the screen was a high-definition photograph, taken from a hidden camera, Nathan and Chloe, embracing intimately in the shabby lobby of the Riviera. The second image was an elevator security camera still, the two of them locked in a hungry, passionate kiss. The third was a frame from the police body cam footage, Nathan, half-naked, and Chloe, in her bathrobe, their faces twin masks of guilt and terror as the door to room 703 swung open. Kevin made a sound Elena had never heard before. It was a low, wounded, animal groan, as if he had been physically stabbed. He stared at the screen, his face ashen, and then slowly, mechanically, turned his head to look at Chloe. His whole body began to tremble, a fine, violent vibration, like an engine about to shake itself apart. The presentation did not stop. It cut to a new scene, the university campus. Sophia appeared, her face filling the screen, her voice clear and unwavering. Chloe Lynn is a serial cheater and a master manipulator. She gets close to men, makes them feel like heroes, and then bleeds them for money and status. Then Peter, his eyes red-rimmed with fresh tears. She told me I was her soulmate. She made me believe it. I gave her my savings. One girl after another, a devastating, relentless parade of victims, their stories a single, repeating pattern of deception and emotional destruction. The faces and voices kept coming, a tsunami of evidence that painted a portrait not of a young woman in love, but of a cold, calculating predator. The final slide was the simplest, and the most brutal. It was the medical report. A large red circle was drawn around the HCG test result. The single word, highlighted in yellow, seemed to scream from the screen, negative. The screen went black. The silence that followed was not empty. It was a crushing, living thing, a physical pressure that seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. Chloe was no longer pale. Her face was a ghastly, greenish-gray, the color of a corpse pulled from a river. Her mask had not just slipped. It had been vaporized, leaving behind nothing but the stark, ugly, terrified truth. Elena turned to her. When she spoke, her voice was soft, almost gentle, the voice of a therapist delivering a terminal diagnosis. So, Chloe. Let's review, shall we? The phantom pregnancy. The secret boyfriend who was also pretending to be my boyfriend. The seemingly endless army of men you've been swindling across multiple state lines. She took a single, deliberate step closer. My question is simple. If you are pregnant, which I seriously doubt, whose child would it be? Kevin's? Nathan's? She paused, letting the silence stretch. Or some other poor, anonymous fool whose name you've already forgotten? You. Chloe's voice was a strangled, reptilian hiss. Her perfectly manicured hands were clawing at the edge of the tablecloth, knuckles white. You monster. You planned all of this. No, I just documented it, Elena said, her gaze as cold and unyielding as frozen steel. Then, Kevin moved. He stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the hardwood floor was like a starting pistol. He walked toward Chloe, his legs stiff, his movements jerky, like a badly controlled marionette. He stopped in front of her, his face a blank, unreadable slate of shock. But his eyes were no longer full of blind, adoring love. They were full of a horror so profound it had passed through revulsion and come out the other side into a desolate, hollow emptiness. All those nights, he said, his voice a dry, ragged whisper. All those nights you cried to me about your abusive family. About your debts. About how I was the only one who could save you. I begged my sister for money for you. I got down on my knees for you. I almost tore my own family apart for you. His voice cracked, a dry, heartbreaking sound. And the whole time, you were with him. Kevin, please, it's not what it looks like. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness, you have to believe me. Kevin's fist did not connect with Chloe. It came down on the dining table with a crash that was like a bomb going off. Plates jumped, glasses tipped and shattered, the carefully arranged platters of food slid and spilled across the white linen tablecloth. A gravy boat splashed across the front of Chloe's pale yellow dress, a dark, ugly, permanent stain. Get out, he roared, the sound tearing from the deepest, most primal part of his chest. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Now. Chloe scrambled backward, her chair tipping over with a clatter. Her father, Frank Lin, grabbed her arm in a vice-like grip, his face a thundercloud of humiliation and rage. He started dragging her toward the door. Don't you worry, he spat, we're leaving. We want nothing to do with you crazy, vindictive people. And we'll be taking legal action for this slander, you see if we don't. Wait. It was a single word, spoken quietly. But it came from Henry Chen. He had been a statue throughout the entire ordeal, a silent, hollowed-out witness to the destruction of his son's world and the exposure of his own catastrophic foolishness. Now, he rose to his feet. He looked 10 years older than he had when he sat down. Deep lines of grief and shame were etched into his face. But his posture was ramrod straight, and there was a new, quiet, formidable steel in his eyes. He stared at Frank and Helen Lin, and they stopped in their tracks, intimidated despite themselves. Your daughter, Henry said, his voice hoarse but unwavering, has committed a serious fraud against my family. She conspired with that man to extort money and property from us under false pretenses. This is not a simple broken engagement. He turned his gaze to Chloe, and for the first time, she flinched away from an older man's eyes. I have a mind to call the police right now and have you arrested for attempted grand larceny. You wouldn't dare. Helen Lin shrieked, but her voice was brittle, panicked. Try me, Henry said, and the single, quiet phrase was more terrifying than any scream. He let his gaze sweep over the ruins of the dinner, over his shattered, weeping son, and over his fierce, magnificent daughter, before finally coming to rest on his wife, Lily, who was standing in the corner, silently crying. All the years of his stubborn, misguided, patriarchal pride dissolved in that single, all-encompassing look of failure. He had been so busy trying to secure his son's future, he had almost allowed a predator to destroy his entire family. The Lin family fled. Frank dragged Chloe, who was now sobbing hysterically and shrieking obscenities at Elena, out the door. Helen scuttled after them, her face a pinched mask of fury. The front door slammed shut with a resonant, final bang that shook the pictures on the walls. The Chen family was left alone in the wreckage of what was almost their future. The next hour was a blur of raw, painful, desperately needed catharsis. Henry sat slumped in his armchair, the throne from which he had issued so many misguided decrees, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders heaving with silent, racking sobs. Kevin was on the floor, his back against the wall, his knees drawn up to his chest, staring at the stained tablecloth with a 1,000-yard stare. Lily was mechanically trying to clear the table, picking up shards of broken glass with trembling fingers, her tears falling onto the ruined food. Elena stood in the middle of them all. The adrenaline that had sustained her for weeks was gone, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. The revenge she had meticulously planned, the trap she had laid and sprung to perfection, was complete. But the victory felt hollow. Because the cost of the war was standing right here in this room, in the broken pieces of her family. This was not a triumph. This was the painful, bloody beginning of a recovery. She walked over to her father and knelt down in front of his chair, the way he had never knelt for her. She hadn't been this physically close to him in years. "Dad." She said it softly. He didn't look up. His shoulders just shook harder. "In another life," she began, her voice barely a whisper, a secret spoken in a confessional, "you wouldn't listen to me. I did sell my condo. You made me. Chloe moved in and threw me out, and Kevin helped her. Mom went looking for me in the middle of a snowstorm and a truck hit her. She died alone, Dad. In a cold hospital corridor. And I had to sign the papers. I had to say goodbye to her by myself, because you were working and my brother was with his new family." The sound of a plate shattering on the floor cut through the room. It was Lily. She was staring at Elena, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mother's primal, instinctive horror. Henry's hands finally fell away from his face. He lifted his head and looked at his daughter. The raw, unhinged, ancient grief in her eyes told him she was not speaking a hypothetical. She was not being cruel. She was confessing a truth she carried in her soul. A truth that had already happened to her. "Elena." Her father's voice was a dry, broken rasp. He looked 100 years old. "You always said I was the big sister," Elena continued, a single, hot tear tracing a path down her cheek. "You said it was my duty to sacrifice everything for my little brother. My money, my home, my future. And I did it. And it destroyed us. It killed Mom." She took a ragged, shaking breath. "I'm not here to collect an apology, Dad. I'm here to ask you to see me. To finally, truly see me. I am not just a tool for Kevin's happiness. I am your daughter. I am right here. And I am so tired of fighting for a place in my own family." Henry Chen looked at his weeping wife. He looked at his son, who was now staring at Elena with an expression of dawning, soul-crushing horror, as if the monstrous truth of his own selfishness had finally, irrevocably, sunk into his bones. And then, for the first time in Elena's life, her father reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, his skin papery and thin, but it was the most intentional, the most loving gesture he had ever made toward her. The apology was not in his words, it was in his touch. "I see you," he whispered, the words cracking and breaking, his tears falling onto their joined hands. "God help me, I see you now. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, my little girl." It was enough. It was not a magic wand that erased the past. It was not a cure. But it was the first solid, honest ground they had ever stood on together. It was a start. Kevin crawled across the floor. He didn't stand, couldn't stand. He crawled on his hands and knees through the spilled food and broken glass, his movements pathetic and uncoordinated, until he was at Elena's feet. He looked up at her, his face a ruin of tears and shame, the face of a boy who had finally, catastrophically, grown up in a single evening. "Elena," he choked out, his voice raw. "I'm going to go. I'm going to go work for Mike at his auto shop in Texas. I'll do anything. I'll sweep floors. I'll change oil. I'm going to earn back every single dollar I ever made you and Mom and Dad waste on me. I swear to God, I'll do it. Just, please. Please don't give up on me." Elena looked down at her little brother. The arrogant, spoiled boy who had been her tormentor in another life was gone. In his place was a hollow, terrified young man who had just watched his entire world, built on a foundation of lies, burned to ashes around him. And despite the dark, heavy stone of grief she still carried in her heart for what he had done in another life, he was still her blood. He was still the little boy she had taught to ride a bike. "Don't swear to God, Kevin," she said, her voice tired but no longer cold. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Just go. And do it." 3 months later, the air in the city had turned crisp with the first hint of autumn. The condo that had been the source of so much pain had been transformed into Elena's sanctuary. She had painted the walls a warm, calming sage green and filled the balcony with fragrant herbs and hanging plants. It was her space, her fortress of solitude. Kevin was in Texas. He sent money home every month from the auto shop, modest amounts, but the deposits in her parents' bank account were a tangible, growing proof of the new man he was trying to build from the wreckage of the old one. Their father, Henry, had started taking long, quiet morning walks, and sometimes, when he was sitting on a park bench, he would call Elena just to ask about her day. It was a small thing, a tiny miracle. The last of the summer's brutal heat had finally broken when Matt Show's new coffee shop opened its doors. After the night of the dinner, he had quit his high-paying cybersecurity job, announcing that he'd had enough of other people's digital catastrophes and wanted to create something real. The shop was a cozy, sun-drenched space in a converted warehouse, filled with reclaimed wood, worn leather armchairs, and the intoxicating smell of freshly ground coffee. He had named it 9 Years and hung a simple, hand-carved wooden sign outside. Elena was his first official customer on opening day. She sat at the polished concrete counter, watching him work the gleaming Italian espresso machine. He moved with a focused, quiet competence that she found deeply calming. He had always been there, she realized, the thought settling into her bones like a warm truth. In the chaotic hallways of high school, through the drunken parties and all-night study sessions of college, and through the long, dark nightmare of her previous life's worst days, Matt Show had been her one constant. A quiet, solid, unshakable presence who never asked for anything but always seemed to be right there, a coffee or a helping hand already extended. He set a perfect, tiny ceramic mug of espresso in front of her, the crema a rich, dark gold. She wrapped her hands around its warmth. "Why 9 years?" she asked, looking up at him. Matt wiped the steam wand with a clean cloth, a ghost of a thoughtful smile playing on his lips. "You figure it out." Elena thought. She traced the timeline back in her head. They had met 9 years ago, 2 terrified freshmen in the same homeroom. He had been the only other kid who looked as lost and lonely as she felt. It was us, she realized. The shop was named for them. 9 years of an unbroken, unwavering friendship. 9 years of him waiting, with a patience that now seemed almost superhuman, for her to finally, truly look at him. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't have to. She just looked up at him, and for the first time, she let him see the full, unguarded depth of her gratitude and, something more. Something new and terrifying and hopeful. Matt's smile widened, his dark eyes crinkling at the corners. He saw it. He read the realization on her face. Without a word, he slid a small, perfect blueberry muffin onto a plate and set it beside her cup. "On the house," he said softly. His fingers brushed against hers as he pulled his hand back. It was a fleeting, electric touch, and he pretended not to notice, turning to polish a spotless portafilter. But Elena noticed. She noticed everything about that single, small touch, the warmth of his skin, the slight roughness of his fingertips from his rock-climbing hobby, the steady, reassuring solidity of him. For the first time in this hard-won new life, she allowed herself to truly look at him. The way the soft, golden afternoon sunlight, streaming through the warehouse windows, caught the flecks of amber in his eyes. The quiet, patient strength in his hands. The steadfast, unhurried grace of a man who had waited almost a decade for a woman who was lost in time to finally find her way back to the present. A warm, unfamiliar feeling bloomed in her chest, spreading through her limbs. It wasn't the fierce, consuming fire of revenge. That fire had burned itself out, leaving this behind. This was a gentle, steady, radiant glow. It felt like coming home. It felt a lot like hope. "Matt?" she said, her voice soft. "Yeah. Thank you. For everything. In this life, and whatever came before." He met her gaze, his hand stilling on the espresso machine. His smile widened into something genuine and bright, a smile that reached his eyes and filled the space between them with light. He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. He had always believed her. "Anytime, Elena," he said. "I've told you. I'm not going anywhere." Outside the coffee shop's big, sunlit windows, the city hummed with ordinary, beautiful, chaotic life. A mother pushed a stroller down the sidewalk. Two old men argued over a chessboard in the park across the street. The future was no longer a blood-soaked battleground to be grimly survived. It was a wide, open, sun-drenched road, full of terrifying, wonderful possibilities. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Elena Chen was ready to get in her car, turn the key, and drive down it. With the window down. With the music playing. With Matt, always and forever, in the passenger seat beside her.